The best people in your life will be people who see potential in you that you didn't see in yourself.
We pulled the airbeds out of the closet, we inflated the airbeds, and we called it the Air Bed and Breakfast.
We were not met with success. It did not take off like a rocket ship. In fact, I would call it a miserable failure at that point.
But it made me realize that like these homes are these private spaces that you never let anyone in, but you understand why. There's no trust.
People did not think strangers would stay with other strangers. They thought it was crazy.
And we came up with a new vision for Air Bed and Breakfast, and that was, why don't we just try to make it just as easy to book someone's home as it is a hotel?
We like to say that Airbnb is the eBay of space. We allow people in over 1,050 cities and over 76 countries to list their extra space by the night.
And Airbnb, the vacation rental company, has reported a record $1.2 billion profit.
The first case we're going to talk about is Airbnb, because it's a very interesting, a very exciting, a very highs and lows types of stories, and that's a very inspiring story too, because three founders of Airbnb with the name of Joe Gebbia, Brian Chesky and Nathan. These were the three boys who started off this venture, and these three boys just decided to start a new venture, and it only started with just because these three boys were staying in some room in San Francisco, and they were not able to pay their rent basically, and what they decided was to just rent out those air mattresses and offer some breakfast with the people who are traveling and are looking for cheaper stays. So yeah, that when the air mattresses were probably rented out well, they decided to make a website with the name of airbedandbreakfast.com back in 2007, and that website didn't just receive the booking right from the start, but that's where this started from. And this Airbnb, from being just a basic air mattress rental service to the billion-dollar company.
I get to San Francisco, and Joe tells me the rent is $1,150. I didn't have enough money for rent. That weekend, this international design conference was coming to San Francisco. We went to this conference website, and we noticed on the conference website they had like a hotels tab. And we clicked on the hotels tab. And in the hotels tab, there are always hotels, and next to every hotel, it's sold out. And at that point, we just had this idea. We said, well, designers need a place to stay. We literally have no money. In fact, I don't know how I'm going to make rent. So we thought, what if we just created a bed and breakfast for the design conference?
The initial days were not easy. Initial days were tough. Initially, just two people came in to stay, and they were like, were we too optimistic about it? They were like, did we make a mistake? Are we actually investing in the right thing? Are we doing the right job? This is a question that just started to pop in, because when they originally brought the idea to US San Francisco, the people would not generally list their properties because they were not trusting that any just new stranger would come into their home or their lounge or their living room, and they would just offer breakfast to some stranger. That idea was not accepted initially because probably there were security concerns and probably some resentment out there, and that was quite fair. But what their turning point was, what really clicked Airbnb, what just gave that inclined climb on the mountain probably, which actually was the turning point when they launched this breakfast cereal.
So we had this kind of quirky idea to sell collectible breakfast cereal. So Barack Obama, John McCain are both running for president. We thought, the breakfast isn't selling we're a bed and breakfast. We're not selling beds. Maybe we can sell breakfast. And so we started selling collectible breakfast cereal, a Barack Obama themed cereal called Obama O's, which is like Cheerios. We called it the Breakfast Exchange. And we learned about John McCain as a captain of the Navy, so we called it Captain McCain's, a maverick in every bite. And we made these really funny looking cereal boxes. We actually ended up selling $30,000 with a collectible breakfast cereal. And that was actually originally how we funded the company.
This idea of launching breakfast cereal was actually noticed by one of the venture capitalists with the name of Paul Graham. This is another character that just enters into the story. And Paul Graham was a venture capitalist in an organization with the name of Y Combinator, and that's a huge organization, and they are running like over 4,000. They have invested in more than 4,000 businesses. That's a beautiful information available on Google. You should just search it out. But this Y Combinator just stepped in. Paul Graham just stepped in with this organization and decided to invest $20,000 into this new venture, into this new idea, and not basically the product, because Paul Graham was mainly inspired by the determination of these three founders, because they were struggling a lot and then coming up with an idea which is altogether a new one, crazily out of the box, and still able to execute their idea in the market. That was something that inspired Paul Graham, and he decided to invest this $20,000 into this venture. And that was just a clicking point. That was just the point where Airbnb did its job.
The Airbnb guys came in, they had a contagious amount of energy. Their product was crazy at the time, staying in someone's bed. In fact, it's a famous part of the story, like we hated their idea and Paul tried to get Brian and Joe and Nate to change it. The market had just crashed. So we were only funding startups that we felt had like really scrappy founders and could live off of very little amounts of money. And we didn't fund that many people in that winter 09 batch. But I remember at the end, Joe brought out these cereal boxes, the Obama O's and Captain Crunches. They went to some Costco or something and bought off-brand Cheerios and off-brand Captain Crunches, took them out of the box, put them in this new box, glue gunned it shut, and I just thought, oh my God, these guys are really going to great lengths for this. They're going to work hard to do whatever they can to make this company succeed. Even though we were skeptical about the idea, we definitely made the right bet on the founders.
And that's the point where the owners traveled to New York for the first time with this idea, and this was the point where they met the hosts on an individual basis, on a one-to-one basis, and they decided to just offer all forms of support to the people in New York to list their properties, so that they get more listings on Airbnb, so that they actually just pop into the industry and tell the market that this is the real concept.
We went to New York and we met all of our users. At the time, we only had 20 or 30 hosts in New York, so it wasn't that hard actually. And we noticed something about our hosts. We noticed that they had really bad photos of their properties. This was again in 2008, 2009, and camera phones weren't as good as they are today. So a lot of the photos were low resolution, really dark. And so we would call the hosts up and we'd say, would you like a professional photographer to come to your home and photograph your apartment for free? And people were a little confused, but they said, sure, why not? It's free.
So about Airbnb's breakthrough, the last part of the story, the breakthrough, because this was the time when Airbnb actually changed the way we travel. It actually changed the way we perceive staying when we are traveling. And this breakthrough time was mainly due to the global financial crisis of 2008.
I think this is the most significant financial crisis in the post-war period.
There are fears the sell-off will continue on Wall Street.
Soaring gas prices, falling home prices, and rising unemployment.
What kind of recipe is that?
Overall, that's a recipe for a recession.
Back then in 2008, a lot of people turned to hosting because they were losing their homes, high housing prices, and a lot of people, because they didn't have as much money, were looking for more affordable ways to travel than ever before.
That really helped them bring a lot of people who were looking for ways to make up for lost income onto the platform.
It was not an easy road. It was not an easy process. They had to come up, Airbnb had to come up with a lot of strategies to make that growth process and the growth stage much more smoother to sail.
When it comes to addressing safety issues on its platform, some cities have complained that Airbnb has been too hands-off.
They're not actively monitoring these properties because frankly they can't, they don't own them. So that's really where a lot of their problems stem from.
4 people killed, another 4 hurt, all of it happening in a house rented out on Airbnb.
After a 2019 Halloween shooting, the company announced safety measures including a 24/7 neighborhood hotline to field complaints.
We've banned all parties globally on Airbnb. We have a risky reservation queue where we're looking at any suspicious activity, and we have a pretty hands-on team that's using some pretty advanced like machine learning technology to essentially identify anything we think is suspicious. If it is, we'll continue to seek more information.
The company says the number of party complaints have dropped 44% in the last 2 years. Airbnb has also been trying to reduce that rate further by doing things like blocking 1 or 2 night stays on New Year's Eve and Halloween for guests without a history of positive reviews.
Now, these were the years that Airbnb faced and enjoyed the premium of being an entrepreneur. Probably the sales started to increase, the listings started to increase. People were wanting and craving to get their homes listed on Airbnb, and that was probably a new trend. The investors started to pop in, and that is where the first major investing for Airbnb came in from. Sequoia, another venture capitalist after Paul Graham and the Y Combinator. That was the first seed funding or the smaller funding that they received. This Sequoia was the new big thing for Airbnb, and that was another new major character of the story, because the funding provided by Sequoia allowed Airbnb to expand to a much greater level, and that's where the thousands and then probably the millions of people started to pop in.
If I didn't become an Airbnb host, I don't think I would have been able to keep living here. I wouldn't be able to afford it.
Airbnb has literally allowed me to follow my passion. Now I have extra money to buy materials, more time to focus on design, keep doing what I'm doing, while meeting guests and meeting new people.
Hi, I'm Crystal, and I'm a host in an Airbnb-friendly community in Denver, Colorado. I wanted to live on my own without roommates, and Airbnb made that possible, and it's also helped cover my living expenses.
The product was now practically accepted into this market, and the world started to accept the idea that the founders brought in back in 2007. And in 2020, when the COVID hit the world, and when the world was being locked down, when the different phase that the world went through, COVID was one of the major hits that Airbnb had to face.
We started the company over a decade ago, and I thought that was the craziest experience of my professional life. And for many years I said I'll probably never experience something as crazy as starting Airbnb. And in March, I think we experienced that. I felt like a captain of a ship and a torpedo just hit the side of the ship.
Because they lost 80% of revenue in 8 weeks during COVID. This is bigger because not only did they make a comeback from the dead, but they also beat their tech counterparts who have made massive losses since then.
I'm hearing from 2 sources familiar with the matter that Airbnb is considering raising money.
Only a few months after the COVID-19 pandemic caused its bookings to drop more than 70% and its valuation to be cut in half, the company has pulled off a remarkable recovery.
Obviously, this is a huge day for you. We're still waiting for the first trade. Just 9 months ago, you told me it felt like you'd been hit by a torpedo when travel halted, that the company was on the verge of losing it all. What does it feel like in this moment to now be taking your company public at potentially a $47 billion valuation?
I feel really lucky.
Airbnb is responsible for rebuilding global travel in the post-COVID world.
Now that more people can work remotely, it means more people are flexible. And it means, therefore, people are traveling and staying longer. You know, a quarter of our business now, by nights booked, are people traveling and staying for longer than 28 days. So this means people aren't just traveling on Airbnb, they're now living on Airbnb. And it really just means traveling and living are starting to blur. It means you can truly travel and live anywhere around the world. This is the story for millions of people, certainly millions of Americans.
So about the learnings from this huge venture that we just talked about, Airbnb. I feel like that while making this video, even it has just taught me a lot of things. Probably after watching the video, you would have learned a lot of things. And what makes Airbnb different is it just probably the first thing that it taught me is to think out of the box, is to be creative.
And they got the idea to rent out one of the extra bedrooms as a bed and breakfast. Well, there was no bed in this bedroom, but Joe had an airbed in the closet. So instead of calling it a bed and breakfast, they called it an airbed and breakfast.
The second thing that it teaches me and to my viewers and to the world out there is the persistence that the founders showed, because the founders did a great job in going through and staying patient through the tough times, through the darkest of times, through the downturns, through the struggles.
If people could just
experience what we experienced that one weekend, this would be an idea that would spread around the world. And again, maybe thousands of people one day would use Airbnb. And that was our unique insight. And so that was kind of our North Star. And so we just kept thinking to that first week, and that's why we kept going.
Another main element of this business is like this human. An organization is a human. It's more human these days. We should understand this, that the organizations do operate for the people, and they need to understand the people, such as Airbnb understood their customers by being more cautious about health and safety during COVID. They understood their employees by providing that support during the time when they were being laid off, what they would be going through and what they would be feeling. The organization basically understands people associated with them, and organization these days are getting more human. That is what we need to understand, and we think out of the box. We try to stay persistent and firm with the goals that we want to achieve, and be more human with the business ideas that we have got out there. That is what Airbnb taught me. And that's all from Airbnb. We are going to talk more about a lot of business cases, a lot of real world examples, a lot of facts, a lot of research, a lot of information for the business world out there. And the courses that we are about to launch soon would be announced pretty quickly. So yeah, that's it for Airbnb. We hope you enjoy the video. Thank you very much.